Hi, this is Olawale Oluwade, and I want to speak briefly on what I've titled President Tinubu, Why Are You Afraid of Competition? President Tinubu, why are you afraid of competition? There's a deeply profound story in the Bible which gives a glimpse into the paradox of human nature and social conflicts driven by the disparities in human needs. This story in scripture is synonymous with the theory of conflict of opposites developed by the great German philosopher Karl Marx and his associate Friedrich Engels in their seminal work Dialectical Materialism. This later formed the philosophical foundation of Marxism, Leninism, communist governments adopted by old Soviet Union, China, Vietnam, and the rest of them in early 20th century. Now, the conflict of opposites posits there are two contending forces struggling in humans, seeking to first influence us to certain behaviors or tendencies or actions, and thereafter ensuring they master us, they dominate and then control us. Now, going to the story of the Bible, the first recorded human offsprings were the sons Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve. So, on a certain day, according to the Bible, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Why? God himself gives us the answer. Green-eyed envy. Cain killed his brother Abel just because of envy. I don't know why they say green-eyed, but envy. Now, God had given their parents, Adam and Eve, instructions on how to honor him through giving of worthy offerings. Abel complied with this, gave God worthy offerings, and God received him and his offerings. Cain didn't and was rejected with his offerings. And then Cain got angry. You can read this story in Genesis chapter 4 from verses 6 to 8. And let me read part of that. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why is your face gloomy? If you do well, will your face not be cheerful? And if you do not do well, sin is knocking at the door, and its desire is for you, but you must master it." God was advising Cain, the devil is after you to destroy you, but you must master your emotions, master the demons in you. But Cain didn't heed God's counsel to master his inner demons. Rather than be penitent, rather than becoming penitent, seek forgiveness and do right by God. Guess what he did? Cain transferred his misplaced hurt, anger, and rejection towards his brother Abel and murdered him in cold blood. So I bring this home. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had 3 years to demonstrate to Nigerian people, as their president, the following immutable values of great leadership. Number 1, compassion. 2, empathy, humility, vision, commitment, integrity, selflessness, sacrifice, respect, discipline, contentment, etc., etc. But he chose to do otherwise. It is a most curious and quite unsettling irony to me that a man who assumed office as perhaps the most unpopular president since 1999, with the least favorable acceptability rating ever, and lowest winning score as president in 2023, will begin to govern as an emperor, not just merely as a dictator. The manner in which President Tinubu has carried on since 2023 is akin to Roman emperors, not just common dictators. President Tinubu has carried on in 3 years like he didn't give a rat's behind, or frigging beaten if hell froze over, in his conduct, either in style, substance, or actions. Everything students of elementary leadership class were instructed to shun, forswear, and punish in others, Tinubu embraced gladly. Nepotism, conflict of interest, cronyism, self-promotion, self-aggrandizement, arrogance, lawlessness, dishonesty, doctoring of, of figures and all of that, clannishness, boastfulness, etc., etc. A casual observer would think President Tinubu wasn't interested in seeking re-election, or that he believes the constitution would just allow him, to seek the votes of Nigerians, would allow him not to seek the votes of Nigerians, but continue in office in perpetuity. So now it is time for reckoning, to stand before the Nigerian people as Cain stood before God. But then, knowing his administration, his government, has been woeful and disastrous. His leadership and governance has been woeful and disastrous. President Tinubu, he has now embarked with his allies. They've embarked, his political party and allies and friends, they've embarked on a destroy all opposition mission. Pretty much an exact imitation of Cain's conduct against Abel, his brother. And how wonderful is this? Let me put this in proper perspective so that we understand what I'm saying. President Tinubu got, however he got it, notwithstanding, a once-in-a-lifetime platinum, not gold, platinum opportunity, previously only availed to less than 15 men before him, from a pool of 200 million Nigerians, to marshal the enormous resources of states, to do good to the most number of Nigerian people, to render humane, compassionate, and selfless service to the people of Nigeria, to demonstrate good faith and integrity, to prove his worthiness and fitness for the role of president. But guess what? He chose not to. Rather, President Tinubu, he despised the people. You disdained them in both words, conduct, and actions. In one policy decision after another policy decision, you disempowered Nigerians, rendered businesses prostrate, destroyed MSMEs, pauperized workers with wages and salaries that can't fund their transportation to and from work. Food became luxury item and was removed from many households' plates, not tables now. Most households sold their tables long ago. Food was removed from many households' plates. People were feeding, from beans. People became destitute and poor, made miserable. Now, millions were pushed into multidimensional poverty. Millions more lost jobs, and tens of millions more couldn't find any worthy jobs to do. And thousands have since become, criminals just to survive. The reason why we have this, rampant insecurity all over the place. So, instead of empowering Nigerians in 3 years through strategic MSMEs incubation in critical economic activities, rather than eradicating poverty and hunger through, deliberate policy choices and decisions, rather than building primary health care centers all over the 774 local governments all over Nigeria, rather than especially removing the 15 to 18 million out of school children from our streets and from the reach of criminal gangs, because that's why we have massive, uncontrolled, insecurity. Rather than taking away these out of school children from the streets and from the reach of criminals, what did President Tinubu do? You didn't, but instead began awarding multi-billion-dollar contracts to your cronies and associates for roads to nowhere, airports and conference center renovations, vice presidential mansion construction, the purchase of private jets, yachts, thousands or hundreds of SUV, and then hundreds of billions of naira handed to governors of the states with zero accountability. You did this, most of it, essentially to induce and procure these governors to decamp to your party. And then, worst of all, rather than face down insecurity squarely by being hands-on, holding security heads, giving them exacting targets with clear deliverables and timelines, rather, you embarked on tens of foreign junkets, ostensibly to seek foreign direct investment, not realizing that if your home front is not secure, nobody is coming here to invest. So now, the day of reckoning draws near. There's nothing tangible to show to the people how your government has impacted their lives positively. But you are beginning to share food items intended to compromise their consciences and buy you votes, also giving them money. How sad. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, if you did well, why are you buying the people with food items and money? If you did well, with the enormous powers of the presidency of Nigeria at your disposal, why are you hounding opposition candidates or aspirants and their political parties? Why are you destabilizing opposition political parties? And so, let every leader or aspiring leader know this. This is a free masterclass of sorts. Endearing yourself in the hearts and minds of the people you lead doesn't require corrupt inducement or especially even long years in office. It doesn't. It only requires the people seeing tangibly integrity, humility, selflessness, sacrifice, compassion, discipline, contentment. Contentment. Because for the life of me, what does a man need to live a decent life? Because I'm wondering how a man that has everything is still grasping for more and more. So the people will need to see respect for due process, for upholding the rule of law, and then justice. And all of this can be demonstrated in a few days or weeks of assuming office. And when you repeat this consistently, the people themselves proclaim you a hero and then voluntarily re-elect you. That's what happens. For instance, the first and clearest indicator let me give you an example of what I mean by you don't have to stay long, for people to see. The first and clearest indicator a leader, needs to show to the people and then wins their hearts are the pronouncements a leader makes upon taking office that signifies its leadership fitness. For instance, if a leader takes office and says, nobody's buying any new cars for me, I'm not building any new house, nobody's buying any new cars for my appointees, my ministers and DGs, nobody's buying anything. Imagine if a leader also says, nobody's traveling abroad for anything except it is extremely important and everybody's going to fly economy, including myself, I'm not buying a jet. Imagine if a leader says that upon assumption of office. Number two, imagine the second thing a leader does that guarantees him, the winning the heart of the people are the appointments made to key positions of government. There was in the President Tinubu's government, there was a retired PAMSEC that he appointed and seconded to one obscure office, in the vice president's office. To my mind, that retired PAMSEC from the northern part of Nigeria was the best person to be President Tinubu's chief of staff if he actually wanted to serve Nigeria. Third example of what a leader can do to win the heart of the people is the attitude of the leader towards the handling of public finances. How does the leader, handle public, government money? Does he spend government money buying jets or yachts or SUVs, building private residence for the VP, in awarding multi-billion-dollar contracts to his friends and associates, or in addressing the key issues of the people? Another thing, number 4, how a leader reacts to fidelity to due process of law and justice. If a leader does not respect the independence of the judiciary, the independence of the National Assembly, if a leader does not respect due process, and so contracts are awarded, multi-billion-dollar contracts like the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway project was awarded without recourse to due process, public tendering, oversight of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, public procurement, and all of that, then what do you expect others to do? So, I've said all of this. In my considered opinion, President Tinubu does not deserve to be re-elected president in 2027. His election in 2023, to begin with, has proven to be an error of epic proportions. It will be a sacrilege to repeat this, in my considered opinion. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.